Hey, this is John Sonmez from Pluralsight, and in this module we're going to be talking about enumerations in Java, or the enum type. So this module is going to be a little bit shorter. We're just going to cover the topic of enumerations, and it might not seem like there's a lot there, but really Java enumerations are kind of special, so I really want to make sure that we cover this because a lot of people aren't aware of just how neat Java enumerations are, and this is one of those things that I think really can improve your code, especially if you're starting out in Java, to get used to using enumerations. So the first thing that we're going to cover here is what is an enumeration. We're just going to basically talk about the concept, the higher level concept of an enumeration, why you would use one, and what the advantages of using them are, and perhaps when you might choose to use an enumeration. Then we're going to go through and we're going to look at some simple examples of using enumerations in our Java code. We'll go ahead and declare an enumeration type and use that and see how we can use an enumeration to really make our code more readable and understandable. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the special property of enumerations in Java, which is that they are classes. I'm going to talk about what this means to you as a Java developer when you're using an enumeration and kind of the possibilities that this opens up to you as a programmer. Then we are going to look at a more complex enumeration example. We're not going to get into a very complex example, but it's definitely going to be more than the simple example. So I'm going to show you the definition of an enumeration. So an enumeration is basically an exact listing of all the elements of a set. And that's kind of the dictionary definition of what an enumeration is. What that really means is that enumeration is just a collection of things that is all of those things. So if you were to enumerate through an enumeration, you would be going through every single item that is in that set. And a good way to think about this is months of the year, for example. Months of the year are a finite set. That means that there are exactly 12 months in our standard year. And if we wanted to go through all of those months, we could enumerate through all of them. So that's where the name enumeration comes from. And an enumeration in Java is basically a type that we're going to declare that is going to have all of the members that belong to that set. So if we declared an enumeration of months, we would have every single month of the year in that enumeration. So why should we use something like this in Java or in programming in general? Well, one of the most important reasons for enumerations is that it's a great way of naming things. It's real easy to identify something in an enumeration. It really makes it so you don't have to try to come up with using strings or integers or some other type to name something, because an enumeration allows you to put all the names of one thing into one place that you can access it. So for example, we might create an enumeration called months, and then in that enumeration we might have named types that correspond to every single month of the year. Along with that, what we're going to get is some type safety. So if we created an enumeration of months, we'd be able to type the word months and hit dot in Eclipse, for example, and then we would be able to see what all the options that are available to us are, instead of using strings, for example. So let's look at an example here. I'll create a constant string that stores the name of a month. Now, what if I misspell this? If I want to check to see if 2 months are equal, I have to do some string comparison to check these two strings. Enumeration is type safe, and what that means is that you can't compare this to the wrong type. And a month that has the same name is going to be the exact same when you compare two enumerations. The other thing enumerations really do for you is they limit input. And limiting input is really important. It's one of those things in programming languages that makes an algorithm a lot simpler. If you can restrict the input coming into a method, you can really define what needs to happen in that method a lot easier. For example, if you had a method that took in an integer to represent the month, the calendar month in the year, instead of enumeration, you are going to have to check to see what if they enter a negative number. What if they enter a number greater than 12? Is it zero index, or does it start at 1? For example, does month 1 mean January, or does month 0 mean January? So you're going to have to check all these things, but by using an enumeration, you're going to limit that input. And then, of course, it groups things in a set. We kind of already talked about this. And enumerations are iterable, and that means that if you wanted to loop through all the months in a year, you could basically do this, and I'll show you how to do this in using an enumeration. But if you imagine that if you just had a bunch of string constants that you're using for months, it'd be a lot harder to do that. There wouldn't be a good way of getting through every single one of those unless you put them into some collection or list. But an enumeration basically gives you that for free. So when should you use an enumeration in Java? A lot of people are confused when to use an enumeration, so I usually say if you can use an enumeration, do it as much as possible. And of course, you're not going to use an enumeration in every single case, but in a lot of cases where you think you might be able to benefit from an enumeration, go ahead and use one, because it is going to really be beneficial a lot of the time to constrain input. If I had to kind of give two general rules of when to use an enumeration, one would be in place of string constants. So any place that you're putting some constants in your code that are strings, and you're going to have to do any kind of comparison of them, that's probably a good place to use an enumeration. And then the other one is when you're using integers as types. And so a good example of this is that month example where we're passing in an integer to represent a month of the year, a type basically, a type of something. Maybe you have some kind of command processing system and you're using integers to represent the different types of commands, command 0, command 1, command 2, and you basically have mapped them to some name that you give them that command. Instead, an enumeration might be more beneficial. So let's go ahead and look at a very simple example of using an enumeration in Java. So I've got our Hello World project open, and we're going to make a few modifications to this project in order to set this up to test out enumerations. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this stuff that we had done with the collections. And then what we're going to do here is we're basically going to use an enumeration to have cartridges of different colors. Right now you can see that we had created our printer, if you remember, and we had made it take different kinds of cartridges, either a black and white or a color cartridge, using this iCartridge interface, and then it uses generics here. So we either select a black and white cartridge or a color cartridge and pass that in, and either one of those would work. But what would be nice to do is, instead of doing this new black and white cartridge here, is to be able to have, for example, for a color cartridge, have an enumeration of the different kinds of color cartridges or the different colors. So we're going to do that here. And we'll go ahead and change our printer again so that it requires that the type implement that iCartridge interface. We had taken this out before. And now let's go ahead and create our enumeration. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to change this color cartridge to be an enumeration type instead of just a class. So we could have created a brand new enumeration, but what we're going to do is we're going to convert this so that color cartridge is going to be a little bit more useful. And we're going to go ahead and leave these methods on here, but we're not going to do anything with them just yet. We're going to try to treat this more as a simple enumeration. So I'm going to change this from class to enum, and you can see that I can still implement this iCartridge interface. Now it's giving me an error here because I need to actually have some types in my enumeration. And remember, an enumeration is a collection of types. Typically in Java, we would name the types that are in that set in all capitals. So let's go ahead and do some cartridge colors. We'll do red, blue, green for now. And you need to end your type declaration of your enumerations with a semicolon when you have other methods in your enumeration. If you didn't, you wouldn't need to. But the basic, if you ignore these methods here, this is the basic declaration of an enumeration, is you just have your enum, you have the name of your enumeration, and then you have what the types are that compose it. So we could have red, blue, or green. So now we won't be creating a new color cartridge. Instead, we'll be using one of these color cartridges, either red, blue, or green. So let's go ahead and go to our main program here, and let's change this up a little bit. Instead of creating a printer of type BW cartridge, let's create one of type color cartridge. And then we'll change this definition as well. And the reason, if you're wondering why am I using this here and why am I kind of building on this example, is I kind of want to give you a way to build on some of the examples, some of the stuff that we've done before. So it'll kind of refresh your mind about using generics and types and the kind of things that we have already covered. So we have our printer as color cartridge. Now we're getting an error here because this constructor is not recognized, because we can't really create a new well, first of all, a new black and white cartridge isn't going to fit here, but we can't even do this now. We can't do new color cartridge. You can see that it's not even an option because there is no constructor. There's no way to create one. We've created color cartridge as an enumeration, so now if we do color cartridge dot blue, green, red, that are the color cartridge types, the only color cartridge types that we can create. And as you see here, this is one advantage of